Dr. Ruth Miller with her talk today called Meaningful Service. And I welcome Ruth to come on up here. I'm going to lower the podium so she can rise to the occasion.
Oh, you're marvelous, my dear. Isn't she terrific?
Yep.
We are so blessed to have Sally. Put her shell in there. All right, let's see. Is that good?
Yep.
All right, I like hearing that. I have lots of quotes to share with you, and this time I got them printed out, so I don't have my computer up here with me.
Yay.
Yeah. So meaningful and service. We often hear, now that we have more Buddhism in our culture, we hear about meaningful work. Never heard about that until the Tibetan diaspora, so I actually kind of blessed that thing, sadly so. But meaningful work, meaningful service, meaningful beingness, right? We live in a culture that wants us to be consumers, not citizens, that wants us to be, receivers, not informers. And it's hard to sometimes remember that there is more meaning in being actively involved and creating than in sitting back and taking in. Yeah. So given that our culture has disinclined us toward meaningful anything, taking it the next step to be in meaningful service, in a way, I'm literally preaching to the choir, because this congregation, as you pointed out, is active in virtually every possible service that could be done in this community, for which I am extremely grateful. Thank you very, very much. It is beautiful to see. And yet, we still have a lot of stuff attached to that word service. And that's because it has evolved in amazing ways over the past 2,000 years. So when the Romans moved into what was at the time Etruria, they took over the Etruscan way of life. And one of the words in the Etruscan language was servoir, and it's kind of halfway between a V and a W, servoir, and it means shepherd, guardian. And as the Romans became more civilized, they began to see that as a lesser function. And if someone were guarding my sheep or taking care of my things, then they are lesser than I am, right? So there was this downgrading of what had been an equal role into a lesser role. And so the idea of serving at table, serving my household, and ultimately being owned by me or indebted to me and under contract to me for a period of time. Because in Rome, you could buy out your slavery, and a guy could buy out your debts, and you worked for him until you paid off those debts. It's kind of like the indentured servants that were a great number of the people who came over to this country in the first 100 years, to this continent. And we tend to forget about those. They were effectively slaves of all different colors, shapes, and sizes, and genders, and ages, because of someone's debts, indentured. So the Romans established that, and it was continued through all the way into the 1800s. So servoir became servir, or servir in France. And so we have that continuing idea of taking care of, providing for, etc. Well, that began to shift a little bit over the years, because there was this thing that the Roman Church did, and that was it had someone get up in front of everybody else and say, here is the body and blood of Christ. And that began to be called serving. You serve the Eucharist. You serve the Mass. You serve the church and the congregation, because you are offering the body and blood. Right? So now we have Sunday services. Isn't that interesting? Right. And then having a service then led to other things, right? And by the 1920s, more and more things got to be called serving and service. And we had service stations. Remember when you could go to a place and get your fuel and they'd check your oil and wash your windows? Right? And a few other things. I remember when my uncle would just take the car around the corner to get it serviced every few months, right? Oh, yes. Those were the days. Yep. When I was I was a Navy wife for a number of years, and I was very active in special services, right? And one of the things I did is I helped the very young, very broke enlisted wives figure out how to make ends meet, and we would make up layettes for all the new babies. But another thing that I did is I participated in classes, and I changed my oil and tuned my car, and I taught the Navy wives how to do that for themselves as part of special services for the Navy family, the larger community of the family. And then, as we move forward, so we got in from the 1200s to the 1900s. In the 1400s, we've got treat someone in accordance with what they deserve. It serves him right. Right? Isn't this interesting? All these layers for this word. The Eskimos have how many names for snow, right? We take one word and apply it for all kinds of things in English. And actually, that's kind of typical. Many, many languages have a word that in a context has this meaning, or in a different context has that meaning. And learning the context is a huge part of it, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So when I say that I'm being in service, what am I saying? I mean, I've got a family where every single generation has been in every single war this country has been in the service. And we now thank all the known veterans for their service. And I have some veteran friends who say, I wish people wouldn't do that. It was part of life. It was the thing in front of me to do. We did it. It was our duty, and we did it, and now we're done with it. Now let's get over it. Oh, whoa, I got it. Right? So pay attention. Don't just assume they want to hear that. So what does it mean to be in military service, right? The services, the armed services, right? Well, they're serving each other, and in fact, they are the most socialistic establishment in the world because they completely provide for everyone in a very straightforward manner. If you want to know how to do a national health program, just take either the congressional service or the military service health programs, and you'll know how to do it. The armed services. When my mother joined the Navy in World War II, she didn't think she was going into service. She thought she was doing what was necessary to make up for the fact that half of the guys in her college class weren't coming back. When my husband went into Vietnam, it was the same kind of thing. I lost a bunch of college buddies during Vietnam, and I was a Navy wife during that time too. It wasn't that we were serving. It was that we were doing what we felt called to do in the moment. Whole different world, whole different way of being, yeah? And yet, it was a service. It was a service to all of us. Being there at that time, doing that, prevented some things from happening and allowed other things to happen that we would never be experiencing what we're experiencing today if that hadn't been going on. So there was service rendered, even though at the moment it just felt like dealing with what needed to be done. So everyone who's ever kept a house knows this. Cleaning the toilet is just something that needs to be done. But it's a service, right? Clearing the table, wiping it down, getting the dishes into the dishwasher and out.
In proper order.
Well done. Before or after the dogs lick the plates. Yeah, all of that, all those things that we do day after day are acts of service, sometimes for our own selves if we're living alone, but even doing that, making it possible for us to show up in the world and to be the healthy, powerful beings we really are, is an act of service. Yeah. And it's not anything that is less than. One of the things that has begun to shift, we still got it a little bit. You know, someone who's waiting tables is not as good as the CEO that's making 26,000 times their salary. What? Where did that come to? Right? But nonetheless, more and more we're seeing that service is not necessarily a pejorative. Service is something that is, as Muhammad Ali liked to say, the rent we pay for living in this world. Isn't that cool? Shirley Chisholm picked up on that one too. I don't know which one said it first, but the rent we pay for living in this world is service to the community, right? Now, in the times when the word was beginning to be integrated into the larger culture, way back in the 1200s through the 1800s, we all automatically served. Living was an act of service to ourselves and to everyone around us. We would grow things and we would share things in a gift exchange economy. It was before the money thing started being the important part. For those of you who are aware of this, the income tax was passed by a majority vote because everyone knew it was only the very wealthy who were going to pay it. Yeah. Right, everyone else didn't have any money anyway. They were just getting by doing things, right? Taking care of themselves. Don and I were talking about housing. Prior to World War II, 90% of the population lived on self-sufficient farms. 90% of America's population. It's less than 5 now. Yeah. But in the process of shifting to an industrial citified culture, we had a variety of shining lights helping us to make the transition. And one of them actually was Henry Ford. And Henry Ford says, a business that is entirely devoted to service need not worry about profit. They will be embarrassingly large. Profits will be embarrassingly large. Henry Ford said that. He also said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. But that he was in that transition time. You know, he said that helping to create the industrial America, where everyone became wage slaves, in the sense that they had to earn money in order to have health insurance, in order to have a place to live. That was not normal prior to World War II. You always had a household that you could become part of and help create and not have to pay money. But by the time the war was over and we established something that became the initials for a major company in this country called I've Been Moved, IBM. One of my friends grew up in the 50s and 60s. He went to 12 different schools in 9 different cities. I've been moved. Yeah. And so a huge part of that fundamental backbone of life that is service got broken. In fact, it got torn apart into a lot of little pieces. And many of us felt like we had to work for the man, work for the company or whatever in order to hold the family together. And now we're in retirement and we can serve, which is why you are wonderfully active in our community. Most of you are retired and can serve. And then there are the few folks like your favorite brother Bob who just created a whole life of service. And one of the things that people who do that realize is something that Mohandas K. Gandhi said. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in service to others. Yeah? And you guys are experiencing that. And many of you have your whole life, which is beautiful. But then he said something else. He said, service which is rendered without joy helps neither the server nor the served. But all other pleasures and possessions pale into nothingness before service which is rendered in a spirit of joy. And that's when it becomes meaningful. That's when it becomes something that is developing us and everyone around us. When we show up joyfully aware that there's something wonderful going to happen here. Now that service may be showing up for a meeting or a garage sale or a greeting or treating or getting up here and doing the announcements and all those good things. It may be public service. And there are a lot of public servants who have words to say about that. There's a woman who was a Congresswoman, Dorothy Haight. Community service is important to the person who serves as well as the recipient. It's a way in which we ourselves grow and develop. And then there was Margaret Chase Smith. Anyone remember her? What a woman. Oh my goodness. Public service must be more than doing a job efficiently and honestly. It must be in complete dedication to the people. Yes. She was amazing. Woodrow Wilson, there is no higher religion than human service. To work for the common good is the greatest creed. And we do that internally as well as externally. Yes? Yes. Now, there's a movie star. She's the woman who is in X-Files, Gillian Anderson, right? Think of X-Files, the doctor in X-Files, right? This is what she says about her private life. Be of service. Whether you make yourself available to a friend or coworker, or you make time every month to do volunteer work, there is nothing that harvests more of a feeling of empowerment. Empowerment. I have more than enough I can share. I am empowered to share. And that realization that I always have more than enough is that fundamental basis on which, frankly, the United States of America was formed. Has not been the media message for a while, but that is what we are. We are a people who have more than enough. We have more than enough energy. We have more than enough stuff. We have more than enough intelligence, wisdom, knowledge, technology. We can share. We can share. And as we share, we are enriched. And that is the essence of the American dream, really. To be in that place and that way of being. And what's really cool is that dream has spread around the world. There are many things about the globalization of our economy that are not cool, but that is really cool. That there are more and more people on this planet who realize that they have worked hard in service for their family and their community, and now they have more than enough and can share. And from that place, they have a deeper meaning in their life. Yes? There is nothing stronger than the heart of the volunteers, said a general during World War II. I love that one. There is a woman that I had only heard the name of, and I didn't know hardly anything about. Her name is Mary McLeod Bethune. Anyone here? Oh, good. It turns out that Eleanor Roosevelt and she were best buddies. This is the granddaughter of slaves whose family were able to have their own farm. She was the youngest of 15 children. And she loved education. And when she was old enough, she was one of the teachers in the local one-room school. And when she married and was moved, she set up another school. And mostly it was for girls, and mostly it was so that they could become independent. And she didn't charge any more than necessary. People would bring what they could. And then when she was moving on, she created another school. She ended up creating about 5 schools. And somewhere in there, Eleanor Roosevelt found out about her. And she became an advisor to the Roosevelts prior to Franklin Roosevelt's election. And during Franklin Roosevelt's term, she actually had an office in Washington, D.C., and was paid a salary to encourage African American participation in governmental projects. And over 5,000 people received grants and funds through her office in the 1930s. And she had a military rank during World War II. She was the coordinator of the African American Women's Corps. And she had a rank and a uniform. She says, faith is the first factor in a life devoted to service. Without it, nothing is possible. With it, nothing is impossible. Yes. And that faith is the realization that there is always more than enough. There is more than enough energy. There is more than enough resources. There are more than enough people to show up. There always is more than enough. And when we know that, and we live that, and we express that, we experience that. Truly. For some reason, I am being guided to say, there have been times in my life where I didn't know where the next $50 was coming from. The first thing I would do is go through my house and find out what I could give away. There is always more than enough. And there was always plenty. Yes, there is always. So when we serve, we are demonstrating to ourselves and to our community this truth and our faith, that we are more than enough, that there is more than enough to help all of us, for all of us, to thrive in community together. Yes? Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. Yes. So we're going to do a little